Good afternoon everyone, it's Saturday the 20th of June. I've been plodding on doing the work that nobody will ever see. As part of any van build, insulation, flooring, wiring, electrics to it, well, plumbing to a degree. People don't see it, but it has to be done and it takes a lot of time. So in my previous video I covered off how I've been insulating sort of areas behind all the metalwork. Over the past week I've plodded on doing a bit more insulation using this recycled bottle insulation that I bought from Amazon. It's got into these upper panels okay, it's not bulging out too much. Other than for running it into these sort of areas here, I don't think I'd buy it again. It's not the nicest stuff to work with. I eventually did manage to find a way of cutting it. I pinched a carving knife from the kitchen, put a really good edge on it on a sharpening stone and just had to keep sharpening it because it blunted in no time at all. But I've got most of the insulation now in all these various panels at the top, and put the glass off because I can't see. Up here, if you look at or if you've been watching the previous videos for this van, you know it's an ex-ambulance. Up here I've got 18mm plywood fur-ins, and above those are steel trays welded to the roof of the van. So I was always going to have to live with these trays, and that did have some advantages. I've added 18mm fur-ins to the ribs of the van. These are quite wide, and I've used these as little shelves for insulation to be supported on. And above the metal trays and above this one, it's 25mm PIR, is a much nicer recycled bottle insulation from Wicks made by a company called Dial. It compresses reasonably well, so I've managed to achieve what I wanted to do, which is insulation right up to the metal roof or the metal skin of the van with PIR below, and with all the gaps and all the joints. There is no gaps, so I've managed to, there are no gaps at all, and I have a really good seal between the ribs as well, so I haven't got to mess about filling with foam or anything at all. So the centre of the van is now fully insulated end to end. I've put some wiring in for some lighting. And what I'm now working on is the sides, and you'll probably notice up here, all this conduit is what came out of Was. I've kept it all because I know I'd reuse it. My original intention when I first started planning this van was I didn't want to have any cabling hidden at all. I was going to put everything external so I could update it, change it, because being a bit of an engineer I keep thinking of new things to do. So I wanted a way to actually be able to ensure that if I wanted to add something I could easily. I've run 3 lengths of conduit here. They terminate there because that's going to be an access panel, and at the moment on this side of the van the longest pieces of conduit I had were pretty much that long. There is one large piece that I've cut short for now simply because it made it easier to pull the cable through, but I will add a piece to it there which will go all the way through to where you can see all that cabling dangling over there. That's where the bulkhead will go in, and that's where some of the switching and panels and controls and bits and pieces will be. The 2 cables there, the centre piece of conduit is going to be for 12 volt DC, charging sockets, 12 volt DIN plugs, etc. And the lower cable is for mains, and it's always worth isolating mains separately. So those 3, they will always be accessible even though there'll be cabinets covering them. Oh. The Max fan's just kicked in. Those 3 pieces of conduit will allow me to pull cables through them as and when I require, even once they're hidden by cabinetry. There's 2 Cat 5 cables dangling down there. One of them will go to the MT50 controller for the EPEVA controller, solar charge controller that I'm using. The other one's just spare. I've got additional cabling that's going up there which will be for 3-way switching of lighting, so we've got a light switch at the back here where the bed will be, as well as light switches on the bulkhead section for when we come in the van. I've got some additional cabling for the scene lights I've added. All the scene lights are now wired through, and that just works. And then the same on this side of the van. I've run length all the way end to end. Again, the one dangling down there, that will carry the mains cable for our fridge. The top one has got the cables in it already for both reversing cameras. One of those reversing camera leads, where is it? The only place I haven't insulated yet is this area around the rear doors, and that's because I'm still doing wiring. One of the reversing camera leads is fairly easy to run anywhere, but the other one, where is it? The other one has got a dirty drape plug on it. So that needed quite a big piece of conduit to run it through. So that conduit runs all the way along, and again, I've strapped them up using this technique of using cable tie. Basically, if you just put a single cable tie around a bunch of wires, you just end up with a bunch of wires. This technique allows you to keep each, this is conduit, but the same method applies to wires. This technique just allows you to keep those wires completely separated. Over there you can see the drop down for the cables from the solar panels. That cabling will be routed in that top conduit as well, run through the frame of the rear doors and down to where the charge controller is going to go. At the moment the charge controller is sitting on the seat, and I'm using it to charge the chassis battery. I'm going to try a little bit of an experiment when it comes to doing this piece here. From the original van, I've got that section of ply there with the metal backing. That is what was originally screwed directly behind this piece of ply here. This piece of ply basically goes down there like that. The piece of wood on top of the sheet of ply is about 3 inches wide, so the actual ply drops down there, and you can see the bottom of the ply screws in there. And these, basically, I'm using what came out of the van. No point throwing it all away. I tend to use the upper lockers as came out of the van, so I can easily recreate or replace the parts I took down. And what this actually creates is a nice big void behind here. Well, not a nice big void, but a reasonable void. Hence, I can do this. I don't have to worry about hiding it or anything like that, because that piece of ply will go like that. What I can also do, and this is something I'm going to experiment with, but it should work, I'm going to run a sheet of insulation using almost like a wash. I'm going to use these like a washing line. I'm going to run a sheet of insulation all the way along there and down to about this area here, and that will give me almost a double layer of insulation up this area here. At the same time, I've got my finger on the edge of this metal tray here now. It's a sort of a U-shaped tray. The insulation that I've run through from the ceiling is here, tucked out the way. I can push that back, which is what I'm going to do, and then I'll tuck a new piece into this metal tray and let that hang directly over the top of the piece that I've actually connected as a washing line here. When I put the piece of plywood up, that will sandwich the two, and I'll get a completely seamless layer of insulation all the way up there. That's the theory. The only thing I can't do, obviously, I haven't got room for any of this PIR insulation here because there's plywood there and it won't work. But I can create a double layer of recycled bottle insulation here, and that will give me a really seamless effect. And then the outer skin, or this area here, up here, this will then have the vapour barrier on the outside. So that's the job I'm going to be doing next. Sticking a bit of plywood up and temporarily mounting the locker just to make sure that I know exactly where all the holes need to go. One thing to mention about this stuff, you put a screw into this and it doesn't like it. That would turn and twist and almost bunch up. It has a rather nasty reaction to screws, and what I found is there's a couple up in the ceiling, for example, that I had to think about when I was screwing these ferns back in. I found using a soldering iron, poking it through the hole first, it just melts the insulation just where the screw would protrude. That solves that problem. Something else you might notice, I've taken the remaining window tints off. I mentioned it previously that I'd taken it off the sliding door. Well, I've now taken it off these two windows as well, and the difference in light in here is extraordinary, and I've given the windows a bit of a clean as well. I'm still in two minds whether I'm going to put something else on. We're very conscious of the solar going through the glass, but I might be able to make something that I can fit in when needed and take off when not required, because in the winter a bit of solar gain will be useful. Something I did notice when I took this piece of tint off, and I'm glad I did take this one off, is the bonding. There's two separate strips of trim there, you know, plastic edge trim just to protect from the metal. The bonding between the outer skin of the van and that inner skin there had failed, and you could push on that glass and it was just open the gap up. So I've sealed all that up, and I wouldn't have noticed that if I hadn't taken the tint off. This side over here, these are all okay, but that bonding there, not brilliant. This one we're going to leave tinted because the bottom half of this window is going to be completely covered, boarded over. But we will be using that top part of the window for ventilation. So I've decided to leave that tint there, even though it's got some damage on it. But I'm glad I've taken these off. Ever so easy to do. And I think it will make a significant difference to the way we use this vehicle. I've also insulated the lower part of the van. This is using a Nauf product called Earthwool. It's very nice to work with. It's not itchy, it doesn't break up into little fibres. It's relatively easy to cut. This is I had a couple of rolls of this left over from doing my loft conversion a few years ago, and I actually had it in the garage loft and forgot about it. It's 200mm thick, and you can see there that I've used crosses of just offcuts of plywood. It's only sort of 6mm ply, and that just holds it in place. And everything, well, basically, use what you got. I had this laying around, and it's done all the lower parts of the van, with one exception, this corner here. I didn't have enough to do this part here, excuse me. That one's left up at the moment because that's where the mains inlet's going to come for electricity, so I haven't done that yet. And I've also done all the doors. I think I may have mentioned in the previous video I've done the doors, but I've now done the back doors as well. They are fully insulated, framed all the way around. I've even stuck on the bit of plastic, just a bit of tape to hold it in place, but when I come to ply over that little bit of plastic would just be helpful. This one's managed to stay in place on its own, didn't need taping up. But all the doors are now insulated as well. And the only areas I now need to finish insulating, as I said, is this area around here, and I will be doing the same technique of pulling the polyester insulation all the way up these channels here as best I can and across the top here, but not until I finish running cabling. And then the only place left to completely insulate is forward of the vent, and I won't be doing that until I've constructed the basic frame for the bulkhead and the shower room. I've just temporarily refitted this plywood section. You can see now it's flush with the original piece of ply at the top there. I, with a very sharp scraper, cleaned off all the remaining goo. This used to have white plastic 3mm plastic cladding on it. I won't be replacing that. It was invisible and not necessary. I've cut out a section at the very end there. You can see that cut out. I cut that out to give me an access. I will create an access panel there. And the purpose for fitting this panel temporarily is just to actually check a few things. And for example, up there, I didn't cut that piece away. You can see there's a little section cut out for that bolt head there, which is an earthing point. I need to take a bit of ply away from there. Originally this panel went butted up. You can actually see almost a dirt line where this panel went against the back of the van. But I'll just tweak that slightly. There's a void behind the plywood. I will be filling that almost complete with insulation. As you can see, the conduit that I've installed fits behind there perfectly. Obviously, if I was building this van from scratch, I probably wouldn't sacrifice that space, but the lockers fit, they work very well, they're good quality, no point not using them. Hence why I kept all these pieces. I've got a similar length that goes end to end, the full length of the van. I won't be using the full length of the locker that was here originally. The locker will stop probably somewhere around the edge of this window, but I will still be fitting this plywood section back up here. We don't really lose anything by keeping it, and we do gain considerably from the fact it's got this steel reinforcement behind it, which is very handy for mounting. Pretty much where that lower black squiggly line is, there's a metal plate in it. And one thing I was impressed with, and consistently impressed with, is how well ambulances are put together. The furniture is designed to stay put, probably in the event of an accident. I'd like to think it will stay put in the event. I mean, it's bolted in, it's done properly, and I'm trying to replicate that again in this vehicle. That's that cabinet temporarily bolted back in place. Everything still lines up, which is good. So gives me the chance to put a line on the plywood just so I know roughly where the edges are. I'm going to toy with the idea now whether I want to actually adjust the bolts that mount this cabinet so I can slide it to the left or the right. There might be some value in actually lining up towards the end of the van and using this space more efficiently. Don't know yet, but that's the beauty of this nice aluminium stuff. You can adjust them to a degree anyway. So there's the next stage after taking the cabinet and the sheet of plywood down. Originally I was going to put this long piece, effectively this curtain piece, up first, but it was becoming tricky to get the pieces that I fitted in the ceiling to stop getting in the way. They would have dangled down pretty much where the edge of the plywood is, and that would have been awkward getting the sheet that I'm about to fit back up in place. So I've cut those first, fitted them behind the conduit, and then this curtain is just cable tied. I did think about trying to use tape, but it's just not practical. It's cable tied there, and I've just tucked it in at the bottom there while I put the plywood on, and then once I've got the screws in position, I'm going to tease it down so I can get it down into the wedge of the plywood as best as possible. That's the theory anyway. But that's gone up. As the plywood goes in place, that will push that up, and that gives me a double layer of insulation effectively. So there we have the piece of ply screwed back into place and glued now. That's not coming out again, so I hope I haven't made a mistake. The insulation fitted perfectly. It's come down to within about half an inch of the edge of the ply. If I'd brought it right out to the bottom, I'd have got bulges. I've put some extra self-tappers in just to hold it while the PU40 that I use for sealing and gluing just everything goes off. I've been modifying, can you see it over there? It's over there by Was. I've decided that the longer cupboard that used to be on the left hand side would be better suited up here. I can get it virtually from the very end of the van almost to the door opening. I've taken off one complete section, basically one door. I was tempted to leave the entire thing on, but it would have stuck out far too far into the door opening. And that means the cabinet that originally was on this side up here, that one there, will now go up there. And that just makes better use of the much larger cabinet. I've ended up with effectively about another 2.5 feet of cupboard space for very little effort. So that'll do for this little episode.